has promised to lay down the law and take full control of the race. The challenge has been accepted by his rivals as they attempt to find the chink in Lance's armour. The ride against the clock, the race of truth, that's next on OLN. Welcome to the 12th stage of the Tour de France. We're in the day of the time trial when Lance Armstrong hopes he can open up the gaps over his rivals. It's a scorching day, the hottest of the Tour, the scenery is beautiful, but today will be very, very cruel for everybody in this race. Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to our live coverage. Phil Liggett along with Paul Sherwen. Paul, it's a long time since we've had a day as hot as this.
Very hot day, a very difficult day for the racing conditions as well out on the road, because this is, as everybody knows, the first true rendezvous of the Tour de France, the individual time trial. This is where we are, right down in the south of France. A hot day for everyone as the riders move away from Gaillac to Cap Découverte. 47 kilometres. And if you look at the profile there of the race route, it is rather difficult down towards the end.
Well, we're looking at a Tour debut for Gaillac and the Cap Découverte. A 47-kilometre time trial. Veronk, the leader of the King of the Mountains. Cook has the green jersey by 8 points. We've done 2,000 kilometres so far, about 1,200 miles, or 1,376 kilometres still to go. That's a long way to Paris. Fantastic riding still to come. We're out on course here now, and I can tell you that the best time so far, a big surprise this morning. If you look at Guido Trentini here, Trentin rather, has been done by Uwe Peschel. He was the 16th rider to go of the 167. An incredibly good time. He is a good time trialist. Current national champion of Germany. He's won the Grand Prix des Nations. It's his first Tour de France. 1 hour, 1 minute and 58 seconds for the 47 kilometres. Still well clear of the field. An incredibly good ride.
Already opening up some pretty serious time gaps there. Almost 2 minutes ahead of Laszlo Bodrogi, who himself, Phil, is no mean individual time trialist. In fact, time trial champion of Hungary. We're a bit further up the road here right now. The man in second position there is Henrik Glomser, and in fact he appears to me to have been breaking the rules just a little bit since we came on the air, because he's riding very close to the tail of the man who is the current time trial champion of the world, Santiago Botero. Botero started 2 minutes behind Glomser. He caught him quite quickly, but right now it's rather difficult for him to see the difference, and in fact just in front there was Andrea Noe. But Botero, though, is a great bike rider. He was 4th in the Tour de France last year. He's, in fact, a 3-time stage winner at the Tour de France. And, of course, I think more importantly, a winner of the King of the Mountains competition. His biggest title, though, is the World Championships. And he's got a gaggle of riders following him here.
And if you're joining us just now, welcome to the team time trial of the Tour de France, because here we have 3 riders all wiped out. The world champion goes through. Glomser is definitely in line for a penalty today. There's no way they cannot penalise him. He sat there behind Botero for quite a long way as Botero rides in second place on the course. Remembering that Peschel already in with 1 hour, 1 minute 58 seconds. And Botero is currently 52 seconds behind him, but we think losing ground rather than getting closer. And these other two now are scrapping to try and keep the World Time Trial champion in their sights. Absolutely scorching day. It's an undulating course. Not surprisingly, a massive crowd is out there on the route as well. This is Jose Enrico Gutierrez we're looking at the moment.
Well, he's a long way down in the overall classification, but he has been involved in many attacks in the Tour de France. And if you remember going back to the very first day and that huge pile-up on the road into Meaux, this is the man who went down, probably the first to hit the ground very dramatically, but here he is still in the bike race.
Well, boys in green not having such a great tour as we've seen them having in the past. They keep losing their riders to other teams, but it is really so hot. Almost 100 degrees today, massive humidity, and it's going to be sunny all the way.
Well, the individual time trial is, of course, where each rider in the bike race has to go out and ride the measured distance completely on his own. It is the race of truth, and that's what it's called in professional cycling, because it's a race where the rider can only judge his own performance against himself. And it is one that many riders actually do tend to fear, because it is quite difficult. Stéphane Goubert.
Laurent Lefebvre, I think this one is. Yeah, Laurent Lefebvre, who's another French rider here, hoping to turn in a reasonable performance today. We're getting down towards the cream, of course. 131st man to depart in Gaillac. And a massive, massive town, not far from where we're starting. They've named a road here just before the Tour de France started, the Rue de Maurice Garin, the very first winner of the Tour. And we finish in the Allée Laurent Jalabert today, which, of course, is a rider who's dominated this Tour for years and has just retired and is now with us as a television commentator.
This is a very difficult climb at around about 8 kilometers to go, and this is when the time gaps will start to appear. In fact, you can see Santiago Botero now putting time between himself and Glomza, and of course Andrea Noe, the man who he just caught. He's a long way down in the overall classification. He wears number 21 as the leader of Team Telecom, but in fact he's not ridden as well as anybody expected him to, but he does have to ride well here, Phil, to try and keep himself up at the top end of the overall classification, which today I would expect to change somewhat.
Looking there. Let's have a look now at the overall classification. There it is, 49 hours in the saddle for Lance Armstrong to earn himself just an advantage of 21 seconds. He hopes to at least double or triple that today over Alexander Vinokurov. Iban Mayo is in third place, Manthebo is in fourth, and Tyler Hamilton there in fifth. Further down, Jan Ulrich. What will he do today? Will he move up from sixth place overall? Watch out for the young rider Ivan Basso. Heras also possibly. Zubeldi did a great prologue time trial. Dennis Menchoff, the top young rider in the Tour. Top Frenchman, Christophe Moreau. Pietro Cauchioli, best of the Italians. David Miller, best of the British because he's the only one. Michael Bogart, the best Dutchman, and Gilberto Simoni there also on the port frame, just so you can see he's still in the race. 54 minutes down, the winner of the Giro d'Italia. And at least he hasn't gone home as he promised to, which is a good sign to everybody. This is now David Echeverria in the start house, and he's just going to go off 2 minutes behind Laurent Lefebvre as we get closer to the top 20 men to depart the start house. Magical Tour for David a couple of years ago when he won 2 stages of the Tour de France, but still riding very well. He's a very good bike rider, but boy, this is a hot day even for the Spanish. We'll take a short break on OLN. And welcome back. We're just about 50 kilometers for the start of the time trial north of Toulouse. The race will restart from Toulouse tomorrow as we go into the Pyrenees. Today it's the race of truth, as the riders now go off at 2-minute intervals. We're looking at Mikel Aztaloza, who just made his start, and no change in the leaderboard. There's Botero, the world time trial champion, still the second best on the road. He's passed through the third check, but he's losing time to Uwe Peschel, still the winner, or the leader rather, in the start house. 1 minute and 11 seconds he's down now after just on 26 miles of racing. So it looks as though Peschel really has done a great ride today. Anyway, if you enjoy watching the hairy finishes of the Tour de France, you better check out also the running of the bulls. 8 bulls take on thousands of people in a half-mile dash to the streets of Pamplona, Spain. Enjoy it with us, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Just leaving the start house, Juan Miquel Mercado of the Benesto team. Benesto still celebrating that wonderful win by their straight as a die man, Flecker. Or Fletcher, as they call him in Spain. He is indeed, his name means arrow, and what a wonderful day he had yesterday. His girlfriend, who is French, Lourdes, waiting for him at the finishing line. Well, there's plenty of action out there on the course at the moment. Uwe Peschel, though, he was the 16th rider to go today, and he's still the best time at the finish. Pradera is not going to approach that ride. Peschel is not a big surprise at doing such a time of 1:1:58. because he's a very, very good time trial rider. It's his first Tour de France. He's a long way down. He's also getting a bit long in the tooth now, into his 30s. But he's pulled out a real coup now. I don't think the weather has changed, except it has got extremely hot since Peschel made his start. And it might mean that time could survive amongst the leaderboard right through to the big names. And it's happened before on at least 2 occasions I can think of, where the early starters actually gone out and won the day. But of course, even if he wins the day, he won't win the Tour. We are thinking of Armstrong today bidding to take time away from his nearest rivals, and then the Pyrenees, which start tomorrow, they'll try and get their own back, I suspect. Fabio Sacchi, as Paul Sherwen pointed out to me, surprisingly is the best man on the Saeco team right now, and looking for a good ride here. Almost won the stage into Marseille, where he was beaten in the sprint by Jakob Pil. He's not a great time trial rider. He's not appearing on the leaderboards, and neither is anybody right now challenging the ride. One man has just come in at the first check we haven't seen yet. Kritsov from the Ukraine for the Jean de la Tour team has gone through the first check, Paul, just 8 seconds slower than Peschel. That's the first indicator, I think.
It's the first indicator that the weather conditions, it is possible to beat Uwe Peschel, who started in the early riders. And I have a feeling we'll see some very rapid times when the big names come down towards the end. Lance Armstrong himself starting at 18 minutes past 4 local French time. 2 minutes before him, Alexander Vinokourov. It'll be interesting to see the rides today of Jan Ulrich and, of course, Tyler Hamilton, who's been nursing that problem with his collarbone since the very first day of racing. They're almost in the finishing area right now. Santiago Botero is not too far away from the line at the Cap Découverte.
Got rid of 1 or 2 riders. He's caught a number of riders ahead of him. He caught principally Gerrit Glomser of Saeco, who sat behind him for a long way, and I think will receive a time penalty for that. He also picked up Andrea Noe, the Italian rider on the Alessio, but he seems now to have lost them both on that little climb just before the finish. But there is the time of Peschel, and you know, when you're the world time trial champion, you don't like losing. He won his title last year. He's wearing the jersey of world champion today. And he's coming in what will certainly be the second best time when he comes to the line, but it will not survive as such right through the day. He came a little bit sick to this race because he was supposed to be a man to challenge for the final yellow jersey. It's never happened for him. He's never really got into his rhythm. And as he comes up the line, a good round of applause from the crowd. 1:3:31:32 for Botero.
Well, second place there. He doesn't look too happy at all, and in fact I'm not surprised, because last year, let's not forget, this was the man who beat Armstrong in the first individual time trial of the Tour de France. Only by 11 seconds on that occasion, but still it was the first time it had happened.
Looking at the vision there in slow motion of Santiago Botero. Pens and papers out. Here's a question for you with our latest Subway trivia question. This year, Lance Armstrong has the possibility to join the 5-time winners of the 4 of the men who has recorded this feat. Who's the best record? We're asking you in the Tour de France.
Last year, I didn't do the tour for OLN. It was a bummer. This year, I want to do the tour. Maybe I should change my act.
Another perspicacious observation from this reporter.
This guy right here, this is my kind of guy. Leading out, his kind of guy right here. This guy here, meat and potatoes kind of guy.
Armstrong is coming down this finishing straight like a Grand Prix motor car. Well, this year Lance Armstrong has the possibility to join the 5-time winners of the 4 other men who have recorded this feat. Who has the best record? There you are, Eddy Merckx. 5 titles from 7 tries. And that was a great record for Eddy Merckx. Anquetil and Hinault both won 5 of 8. Indurain won 5 straight, and Lance Armstrong hopes to repeat that this time around. Looking at the beautiful scenery here in the department of the Tarn in the Pyrenean section of southern France. As the riders race now to Cap Découverte, the riders continue from the start house. This is Evgeny Petrov at the moment in the start house. No change on the leaderboard. Still, it is Uwe Peschel leading from Santiago Botero. Now, very important, I think, that you warm up for the time trial. Frankie Andreu knows all about that. Frankie.
In order to win the Tour de France, you can't only be a climber, you also have to be a good time trialist. And here at the Tour, the roads are so congested and there's so many people that the riders all warm up before the time trial on turbo trainers. Each rider has their own specific way of preparing for these time trials.
During a stage race, we'll do probably about 45 minutes on the turbo trainer, start off really easy, and do some medium intensity intervals, but nothing too hard. Try not to build up too much lactate before the effort. It's just a matter of getting your body going and waking it up before a time trial.
For the Postal Service, they use Cyclops trainers, which provide a progressive resistance. It's road realistic. As they ride harder, it gets harder on the turbo trainer. Riders who are going for this in the GC will give 110% effort. Other riders will treat this more like a rest day. 75 to 80% effort, try to take it as easy as possible because they know later on in the Tour, all of this energy that they can save will come in handy as the Tour goes on, especially in the mountains and the Pyrenees.
Thank you, Frankie, and obviously the men that warm up best can try and deliver the fastest times here as we continue now with Evgeny Petrov, who's made his start and is just leaving Gaillac here. Just looking at the leaderboard at the moment, and nobody really at the checkpoints are getting close yet to Peschel. He's still the best time at every checkpoint. Uwe Peschel, the German rider for Gerolsteiner, who was the 16th rider to go today of the 167, and is the fastest rider back home with 1:1:58. Botero is the world champion, lies a distant second, and Bodroga, the Hungarian national champion, he is in third place. So that's the situation. We look at Paolo Bettini here, champion of Italy, who's having a terrific Tour de France. He's tried a few times, a little bit unlucky, hasn't had the chance yet to win the stage, but you see he's just below the upper echelon of real good all-rounders. He can time trial, he can climb, he can sprint, just below the top level, and he is the world-ranked #1 cyclist at the moment because he's had some great results this year. Third best as he goes out to that third check at Sal.
Well, looking at Bettini, he's ridden exceptionally well over the early part of this Tour de France, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him coming away with a good stage victory. Johan Bruneel, by the way, is making an announcement that he feels that there are only 4 riders who've got the chance of winning the stage here today. Of course, his own leader, Lance Armstrong. Jan Ulrich is also one of Bruneel's favourites, alongside Hamilton. And strangely enough, he's thrown in the name there, Zubeldia, who finished third in the opening day prologue. I thought Zubeldia's performance was a bit of a surprise, and talking to our colleagues from Spanish television, they believe that although he's a great rider for the future, his big problem right now is he always has an off day somewhere along the route of a major tour.
Just looking down through the town of Côte-sur-Ciel, all of the Roman cities around this area, because this is a very ancient part of France in the Middle Ages, and where we're racing to, in fact, is an open cast coal mine. Now it's finished and they're trying to re-landscape it and make it a nature reserve and an area for outdoor pleasures such as mountain biking and various sites of hiking, etc.
Actually, there are 35 kilometres of mountain biking routes around this area, which at one stage, at the height of its prominence, was a kilometre and a half across at the top of the open cast, and it goes down to about 250 metres in depth.
Now, the study in concentration here as we look at Jose Luis Rubiera, about to make his start for US Postal.
1, 2, 1, stop!
Rubiera here is going to try and do another good ride to keep the team up in the team race. He's 28th overall at the moment after yesterday's stage. The race goes on. We are inching closer to the top 20 men to make their start. They'll all be warming up, of course. We'll take a break on OLN. Welcome back again to the beauty of the Tarn here. We're at Gaillac today. Both towns first timers on the tour route. I'm amazed that so many towns have not seen the tour before over the 100 years. But now we're with the time trial, and it really is going to be a great battle. It's still to come, of course. Well, just looking down, Paul, here we have the situation. The only real news at the moment is that Inigo Sciarro threw in second place at the second check at Sal, deplacing Botero, and he'll come in with a very good time, I think, if he gets half a shot. Kurt van der Wouwer of Quick Step, Davitamon, he's finishing his ride. This is not a bad ride from Kurt because he might just break outside the top 15.
Well, again, a lot of these riders have gone out to try and ride the early part of the course rather hard to give indications back to their team leaders, which I'm sure is going on right now between Santiago Botero, the Colombian rider, champion of the world at the individual time trial, who is almost certainly on the cell phone right now, back to Alexander Vinokurov, because he wants to give as much information as possible about how to handle the course. It's a big help to a rider to go into the time trial to know just exactly which direction the wind is coming from.
Well, this will be the Cofidis rider. I think it is Cofidis rider Ivan Parra. No, it's not. We start off here. It is Laurent Dufart. Forgot about poor Laurent, twice fourth in the Tour de France, making his start. And feeling, Paul, he still has a lot to offer this race this year. He went briefly into retirement. He came back, had a very good Tour of Romandy, which is a big race in Switzerland before the Tour. And now he can turn in some very useful time trials, Laurent Dufart. And he's still got a lot of improvement to make before he's a real challenger, though.
Well, he's 26th overall at 10 minutes, so still the big time gaps haven't started to appear. But this man is a man who will climb up the overall classification, I feel certain, when we go into the Pyrenees. Once will have to do something in the Pyrenees to try and save their Tour de France. They banked everything on Yoshiba Belocchi. As we look here at Carpets, the man who, in the early part of the Tour de France, was the leading young rider. And he's currently third in that classification.
Yeah, this was a good ride by Corbett, right out. He rode well in the prologue. He was an early leader in the white jersey competition. He's a Russian rider, and there's plenty of Russian riders now making their way into the teams around the world, taking part in the Tour de France. And even over this longer time trial distance, he's done a very good ride here. And he should just hit the line inside the top 10 for the moment at least. And 43 kilometers per hour for him today. 105 for Vladimir Karpich. Next out of the start house, if we see him, will be the Colombian rider Ivan Parra, who was in that leading group the day that poor old Yoshiba Belocchi crashed out on the road down into Gap. Now, just looking in, should be Rubiera, who've just caught up with on the course. As we've settled down, the US Postal all want to turn in good times today to help them with their team race. 28th overall for Rubiera. He won't give too much of his energy away, because this man, Chechu, is the, as they call him, is the man who will look to help Lance Armstrong early on the climbs once we go into the Pyrenees. And this year the Pyrenees are extraordinarily hard, not like 2 days in previous years. So we're looking again at around the towns en route through the hillsides of Tarn today as we head towards the finish, and soon the big men will be underway. We'll take another break on OLN. We look out towards the Pyrenees. We can't quite see them, but believe me, they're down there about 100 miles away, all waiting to receive the Tour de France from tomorrow. Today it's the race of truth, the time trial. We're looking at Chechu Rubiera here, who is out on course, and we're waiting to see his first time check. Well, Rubiera, one of the many Spanish riders now on the US Postal Service's team. He's a rider who is now 30 years of age, Paul, stands just under 6 feet, and a regular on the Tour checks, because he's such a strong man when it comes to helping out riders like Lance Armstrong when they need to be helped out. Just up at the start house there, we've just seen the Dutch rider Michael Bogart leave. He had a rather bizarre crash at a feeding station a few days ago. That's why his knee's bandaged. Had a couple of stitches in his kneecap. Very silly fall, but they happen all the time at feeding stations. You've got to keep your eyes about you when you snatch those little feeding bags. And Bogart, again, doing fairly routine tour for him, Paul. He never quite gets up there, does he?
Well, he's had a hard time proving the hopes of Holland on his shoulders, that he is a man capable of winning the Tour de France, very much like Joop Zoetemelk was several years ago. Team Bianchi, by the way, are looking to put in some pretty good performance in the early part of the race. This is Felix Garcia Casas, one of the teammates of Jan Ulrich. The best time at the moment, we are still looking at the 13-kilometer time of the man from Germany, Uwe Peschel, who went through that time check with 17 minutes and 14 seconds. The big names are all stacked up in the last part of the overall classification, although in about 10 minutes' time we will see the British rider David Miller start.
Yes, the big boy still to come as we continue our Tour de France, which started in Paris 2 weeks tomorrow, Saturday. The riders now down in the south of France, racing between Gaillac and the Cap Découverte. And they'll return from the finish line today to stay the night in Toulouse, and then they'll start from Toulouse tomorrow, and then they'll know about the mountains of the Pyrenees. This is something of a surprise, but if you know Uwe Peschel, Paul, he's been a great Olympic cyclist in the time trial, in the team time trial. He's won the Grand Prix de Nation, which is a big time trial as a pro. He's just so far down the list because he can't climb mountains. So he may well take this to the end. We will find out. Champion of France underway, just about anyway. Didier Rousse is the next man to go. He's won this title in France a couple of years ago as well, so 2 years running.
It's pretty funny when every time a Frenchman starts, they seem to have a little noise in the background, which is the cockerel crowing. That'll be the French cock, or the cocorico.
Yeah.
And really, it's quite amusing to hear every time one of the French guys gets into the starting roster.
Well, this man has risen to the occasion, having won the French road race titles the week before the tour started, so he's had it 3 weeks now. That title, as you go back to Felix Casas of Team Bianchi, it's great to see the colours of the famous Bianchi team back in the big races this year. They bailed out Jan Ulrich and his boys and became the major sponsor of the team when Team Coast collapsed after a couple of months of this year. And of course it was Fausto Coppi himself who used to always ride in the Bianchi colours. He was the great champion from Italy. Peschel still leading the race, 1 hour, 1 minute and 58 seconds, and frankly nobody getting close at the checkpoints yet. One or two were waiting to see at the second check, like Michael Rogers and Evgeny Krivtsov, because they were just a few seconds slower than Peschel at that first check, but they haven't arrived yet at Salis, which is the 33.5 kilometre check.
I've been racking my brains out, Phil, trying to think about the guy who won the time trial many years ago when it finished in Fontenay. There was a Spanish rider who started very early off.
Martinez Olivier.
It was in the early part of the day. We had a pretty good lunch that day.
I do remember the lunch, but it was rather a shock when we went to the television and found the winner had already finished.
That was an amazing thing. The thing about the time trial is it's the first time trials, the prologue, the positions of the riders can be chosen by the team managers. But once we get to the time trials out in the race itself, the position of the riders starting is actually on their place in the overall classification. So if you're the best man in the race, like Lance Armstrong is, he has to start off in last position. We look down to his teammate, George Hincapie, who out on the course was actually putting in some pretty fine performances.
Yeah, Hincapie's going to come in with a very good time if he keeps this pressure up today. He looks as though he's quite cool in this very hot weather. It's about 38 or 39 degrees Celsius, and in old money that is just on 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It is very hot, but George has done a great ride. Every indication here, this man has got great form this year. What an ally for Lance Armstrong he will be as we go into the Pyrenees. Such a powerhouse, coming back from an illness, but he seems to have made 110% recovery. Hincapie coming up, and he's still holding a very good time when you compare it against the world champion Botero, who is currently second at the finish, and George not much slower than that. He's going to cross the line, currently fourth.
1 minute et 43 secondes. 1 heure 4 minutes et 43 secondes. Le temps de George Hincapie.
Looking at the slow motion here of George Hincapie as he drives on those big bronze legs, carrying him well on this year's Tour de France. We'll continue as we get down to the last 20 men to go in the time trial. And welcome back, and this is David Miller now on the time trial stage of the Tour de France, the 19th rider from the end to take his start. And there he goes, David Miller now. Forget the bad luck he had in the prologue in Paris almost 2 weeks ago when he lost the time trial by 0.08 of a second and he dropped his chain. I noted there he's got his usual time trial bike out today with his double chain wheels, Paul, so he won't be having any chain problems today. This is Paolo Bettini, champion of Italy, and again the world #1, producing a fabulous ride here. He is so consistent this year as Bettini comes into a good round of applause.
That's a great ride by Paolo Bettini because he's not one of the great time trialists of the world. It indicates here with Bettini finishing fourth that this course today, Phil, is the course for a man who's a tough bike rider, but this is good to see too. Michael Rogers, the Australian rider, 23 years of age in his first Tour de France, coming through here with the fourth or fifth fastest time at 33 kilometres covered.
He might be suffering a little bit because he was third at the first check and he's slipping away a little bit here. Peschel, he is in and has been the fastest time at every check since he left the start house very early this morning, the 16th man to go. Michael Rogers in the breakaway yesterday, and delighted with that. It's his first Tour de France, but it may be getting a little bit tough on him because, of course, tomorrow he has the big climbs to come. Jörg Jatsk, this is the man who stopped when his leader fell, Joshiba Bolocki, when Jatsk himself was riding high in the top 10 overall. He stayed there with his fallen leader Bolocki for 4 minutes, and as a result he's now 18th in the race, when in reality, had he continued, he would still be a top 9 contender.
But it was a huge shock for the whole team when Joshiba Bolocki went down there, and the team wanted to sit alongside him at the side of the road there, because they didn't know when he went down whether or not he could get up and still finish the stage. They didn't know how badly injured he was.
Jörg has had a wonderful tour, and he's the German member of the Spanish team. He speaks English as well as Spanish as he makes his start now. Just before 3:45 here in France, as we now switch around towards the finishing line again. And this is Inigo Sherwen. Now I think he'll confirm this second time because the midway points have been good, and he's still a little off Uwe Peschel, but for Sherwen this is an excellent performance and proving what's possible even in the heat of the day. He's going to come home in the second best time.
This is a great ride by him, and in fact AG2R, the French team, have brought a couple of Spaniards into their squad over the last couple of years. 1:02.33, that's a very good time, just 35 seconds off the lead. I have a feeling, Phil, I think we can predict that the time of Uwe Peschel is going to be beaten when the big names come out in the last 10 places, men like Ulrich, Hamilton and of course Armstrong. And let's not forget David Miller, who's just started.
Yes, we're looking forward to seeing David Miller's time when he gets the first check at Cauzac-sur-Vire, which is at 13 kilometres. Back out on the course now. This is the Kelme rider Ivan Parra. We didn't see him start. He crashed with somebody else finishing on the other end. But Parra had a very, very good ride a couple of days ago. In fact, the same stage when Bolocki crashed, he was in that breakaway. And with all the confusion, he fell back on the leaderboard just before the finish, which is a great shame because he said he had the great legs until it came to the last 4 kilometres and he got mixed up in the wrong sort of attacks.
Well, he's come across to the Kelme team after riding for Once for a couple of seasons and not really showing very much, but this year he has shown to be aggressive out on the courses, and I think we'll see a bit of him when we come up to the Pyrenees.
Well, just see him shift the gear levers on the ends of his tri-bars there. Now, as we've been watching George Hincapie just finished there with a great ride, let's have a look where they all are lining up now so far. The boys of the US Postal Service, George Hincapie in at the moment in 6th place. He just pushed Pena down a slot because Pena was finishing. He was 3rd best when he finished. Floyd Landis 32nd. Ekimov is in. We didn't see anything of him, 34th. And Pavel Padrinov still to go, of course, or still to come in at least. Here's Rubiera, Beltran, Heras, and of course Armstrong. The riders continue to finish. There's nobody threatening yet the time of Uwe Peschel. So we'll take another break. Rejoin us very soon. Yes, we're heading away from Gaillac to Cap Découverte, 47 kilometres of time trial today. They can do more damage than 1,000 around the roads of France in the Tour de France. We have just seen the departure of Richard Virenque for France. This is the best placed Frenchman though, and this is Christophe Moreau. He's got about 4 or 5 minutes yet before he starts. A little bit of a nervous moment here for Christophe Moreau, Paul, because he's always been the man who's taken all the pressure of being the Frenchman who has to succeed, and he's crashed. He's had the race lead and he's left the Tour. This year, though, I get the feeling he's having a great ride. He is the best Frenchman at the moment.
He's the best Frenchman, very relaxed. Also riding well, Georg Tocznik, who is in the red and white jersey as a champion of Austria.
Now, Georg, by the way, they are saying in the Pyrenees could become a major factor in the Tour de France. He says he loves the Pyrenees. He is going with the best form of his life, and he expects to challenge the might of the best. So he could be a top 3 finish in Paris, if you can believe what he says.
Well, he could do. He was 5th overall in the Giro d'Italia. This 47-kilometre test will tell us whether or not he's going to stay up in the top end of the overall classification.
Yeah, I guess you're right. The race of truth, we always call it, because you can't hide behind anybody. At least if you do, you get a big time penalty these days. Jose Enrique Gutierrez, we've seen a bit of him in the stages over the weeks that have gone by. He's not a great time trial rider, but this is a very respectable finish by him. Remember, there are 167 riders in the Tour still. A lot less, by the way, than the organisers expected at this stage of the race. But even so, it's a good ride. 25th position at the moment for Gutierrez. And there are now just 13 riders to start at the other end of the course. This is the Laurent Jalabert Alley that we're finishing in.
Well, Jalabert has been a fairly prominent member of the French television throughout the Tour de France here. In fact, he normally rides on the back of a motorbike, and he was quite fundamental in the decision of how this time trial course should look, and it is a very testing time trial course. It's not necessarily a course for the pure individual time trialists. It's more a course for a man who is regarded as what they call a complete rider, somebody who can climb, time trial and accelerate on the uphill parts of the course. In fact, at 8 kilometers to go, there is a very difficult and trying climb that in fact you have to change down to the slightly smaller gears at the opposite end of your gear ratios.
This is Michael Bogart. He's riding his 8th Tour de France. He finished 12th last year and 10th in 2001. He really nearly cracked it in 1998 when he was a brilliant 5th, but he hasn't quite got the form really to just break into those big positions at the end. Laurent Brochard might welcome the day we finish at Loudonville in a couple of days' time, because he won there a few years back, and he has been a world champion. He's not approaching the time, though, of Peschel, who's still the best time at 1:1:58 at the finish. He went out of the house 16th of the riders today and has turned in a magical ride. Brochard isn't going to take the top 20 places overall because there's still too many to finish. You can have 19th for now. 1:6:06 for Laurent Brochard. He's had a very, very good season, but he seems to be going off the boil of all times in the Tour de France. Manuel Beltran, he's the newcomer to the team here. Beltran, he's 13th to go. What a big improvement he made once the hills came, Paul. He was 101st before we went into the Alps.
He was, but he's a great bike rider. He was brought in almost from a yard sale by US Postal, because once Team Coast had disbanded in the early part of the season, he was very rapidly snapped up by US Postal, and I think they will count on him in the Pyrenean stages that are upcoming. This is still Michael Bogart, wearing number 42. He wasn't regarded as the team leader, Phil. In fact, he's been successful in the Tour in the past, and last year he had a huge breakaway in the mountains and got himself a stage victory in the Alps on the road to La Plagne. And in fact, it was in that part of France where he got his first stage victory in a dash down to the line in Aix-les-Bains. That was 1996.
Very
the
wet.
Same day, Lance Armstrong abandoned with a very terrible cough, coughing up blood. And nobody realized that it wasn't bronchitis at the time, but it was also the beginning of his cancer.
Yeah, those were the black days, but there are happier days for Lance now. But Michael Bogart there, time trialing. He's a good above average time trial rider. We've got no further news, by the way, yet. It can't be long now before the British rider David Miller gets down to the Croix de Fer, which is where they get the time check at 13 kilometres. Michael Bogart here, as I say, a veteran now of 8 Tours de France. He's broken in to the top 12 on 3 occasions, and the only time he never finished, had a very bad prang on the 20th day, almost at the finish in Paris, and he went out. That was 4 tours ago, year 2000. Now it's the turn of top Frenchman here, Christophe Moreau. He's been a yellow jersey wearer in the Tour de France. He is also a very, very good time trial rider. A chance to improve today in the overall. So Christophe Moreau has now got a real shot here at getting into the top 10 riders overall. The Tour de France continues, and very shortly Armstrong will be on the way. We'll take a break on OLN. And welcome back to the Outdoor Life Network. It's a hot day if you're a worker in the Tour de France today, a time trial, and you've got to give your best. Lance Armstrong is warming up as if the weather wouldn't do it for him. He's getting ready now for what he hopes will be the time trial of his life, and he's about, let me see, he's about 16 minutes away from getting underway in the time trial. Didier Roos here, out on course. We're waiting now for the arrival. Miller's just gone through with the best time, Paul. There it is, 16 minutes and 45 seconds. As I spoke, I said we're just waiting for David Miller to arrive at 13 kilometres. He is there, and 29 seconds quicker than Peschel. That's a great ride.
Well, that's the first indication that the time of Uwe Peschel is almost certainly going to fall, because Miller's gone through there very rapidly indeed. This is the leader of the Best Young Rider competition right now, Denis Menshov, a Russian rider on iBanesto.com. He has a lead in this competition of around about 5 minutes so far over Sylvain Chavanel, but that's great news for the British rider David Miller, who has gone through that 13 kilometre time check with the fastest time so far.
Looking at Massimiliano Lelli, David Miller's teammate here, flying the flag for the team a little bit further up the road at 33.5 kilometres at Salle, and looking for a nice respectable 6th place as he passes through in this 47 kilometre test. But Lelli is a good time trial rider, and he hopes that David Miller will have done that time behind him. He won't know at this point, I wouldn't think, but Miller through there 29 seconds better than Peschel. It's taken hours for somebody to level that. David Plaza at the moment for Team Bianchi, also having a great Tour de France here, as we don't forget that best time at the first check, Miller 16:45, Peschel 17:14, and Krivtsov of the Ukraine 17:22. The big guns are beginning to fire.
Well, it's coming up to 4 o'clock in the afternoon in France now. There are only a few riders left to go, and some big names in the starting block. Very shortly we should see Heimar Zubeldia, but at 8 minutes past the hour, Jan Ulrich, he will be the man who will be looking to set the same times out on the course as David Miller. We've also got starting 2 minutes after Jan Ulrich, Tyler Hamilton, and of course the last man to start at 18 minutes past the hour, the leader of this bike race by 21 seconds at the start this morning, Lance Armstrong. And I have a feeling that gap is going to start to widen at the end of this 47 kilometre individual test.
Well, David Cañada there is going to be pushed, or David Plaza is going to be pushed. We're back here to the start house. This is Heimar Zubeldia. He surprised us in the prologue, and he was very, very rapid. Now, if he can produce that and hold that speed over a little bit longer today, then we know that this man is going to be a real challenge through the Pyrenees. He's a worry because the manager of Lance Armstrong, Johan Bruneel, says this man could do one of the rides, and he's expecting a good one from him.
Well, the Spaniards will revel in these conditions that we have down here at the moment. Very hot racing conditions for everybody, well up to between 90 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. This is Michael Rogers coming into the finishing line. Australian flag there alongside his name. The time to beat is still on the finishing line, that of Uwe Peschel. Well, Michael Rogers won't beat that this afternoon, but he will learn an awful lot here at the Tour de France this year. And I'm sure in years to come he will come back to rival the men right at the very top.
Oh, this is a great ride by the youngster from Canberra, because he's right up amongst the leaders in his first Tour de France, and clearly travelling towards Paris feeling pretty good. 1:4:38 at the moment, and he will slip away a little bit more than that, but he could still get a top 10 finish out of this time trial, so that was a nice result for him. I think he would have liked better, but don't forget he was in that long breakaway yesterday, which came down to the finish in Toulouse. Rather annoyed that Fletka, the Spanish rider, slipped away towards the end. Still out on course here now. This will still be our Team Bianchi rider, which is David Plaza. Doesn't look as though he's firing that well, but sometimes the pictures are deceptive. It's a bit of an uphill. The whole course basically is one of these roads of false flat, where you seem to be grinding against the wind and the incline all of the time. He's heading out for the check now, a bit further down the road.
Well, he's been in the saddle for 25 minutes. He'll be looking at the next time check at 33 kilometres covered, which is still owned there by Uwe Peschel. Plaza, in fact, went through the first time check with the 5th fastest time, just 42 seconds down. Roberto Heras in the starting gate right now, and he wants to improve his time trialling over the next couple of years, because he believes that once Lance Armstrong retires, he's got a very good chance of winning the Tour de France. He's currently 8th overall, 2 minutes 28 seconds down on his leader.
Yes, the faithful man who always rides for Lance Armstrong, but has the ability to win for himself if everything were to break true. He's a winner in the past of the Tour of Spain, and he's a very good finisher in the Tour de France. So Lance Armstrong, 14 minutes away from starting now. This is Evgeny Petrov, who's out at the check at 33.5, and he's living up amongst the leaderboard. just keeping his Ibernesto team in the frame. Peschel's still the best rider here, but we're still waiting to see if David Miller can keep up his great start, because he's leading at the first check, which is 13 kilometers by 29 seconds. That's a big margin, and if he can keep the momentum going, then he's going to light the blue touch paper, as we often say, when he gets to 33.5 kilometers.
I had a couple of emails about lighting the blue touch paper. A lot of people realize that fireworks or firecrackers that are available in the United Kingdom have a little piece of blue paper at the bottom. That's where you light them to ignite them and set off the fireworks, and that's what many of these riders are expecting to do today. Looking down there on the vineyards around this area, a very famous vine growing area in the Gaillac region. And in fact, just this morning at the start, there was a very special wine on offer with the name of Laurent Jalabert on it. And that is one of the things that Laurent Jalabert has going for him after his retirement from the sport. This is, I should say, David Plaza, 5th fastest time at the first time check. The fastest time there at the moment is still David Miller of the United Kingdom. But this is Acevedo.
Yeah, he's the other rider, Paul, that stopped with Paulo Jorgiacs when they were looking at the fallen team leader, Giuseppe Bolocchi, and Acevedo. Also, you see a very good time trialist. Both of these riders sacrificing a great running position in the Tour de France to stop and check on the man they were really in the Tour to help. And that's the way it is, you know. They were shocked when they came around the corner, saw Bolocchi lying there, and didn't think twice about the high standings in the race. And they can ride good time trials too.
This is a great team. Well, it's reflected in the fact that they finished second in the team time trial. But here is Ivan Basso.
Yes, the departure now of Ivan Basso, who is riding in 7th place. So a chance for us to have a look at him, thanks to Infinity, accelerating the future. But a young 25-year-old Ivan Basso has seen the view from the top of the Tour podium already, because last year he arrived in Paris as the best young rider, and that's for rankings of riders 25 and under. Now this year Basso's goals are to set a much higher target. He wants to mix it with the big riders, not just the youngsters. The abandon of all but 2 of his teammates will no doubt make the task all that tougher in the mountains. He's only got 2 guys to help him at 25 years of age. He is a winner, and he's staying in the Tour because he wants to do well, and I think he might do just that. So we're now out on the road here. This looks as though we've got big problems here, because this is David Miller, and he has gone past the man in front. Fortunately, Miller's in the lead, and he's caught Peter Luttenberger here. So David Miller has really warmed to the occasion today for Cofidis, and we're waiting for his check at 33.5 kilometers.
Gives a big indication of just how David Miller is riding to catch a man like Luttenberger, who in the past has been a possible top 10 finisher at the Tour de France. But Miller looking very calm and collected. But this is the time that I think everybody wants to see, Phil. The time of Jan Ulrich. He's had a very quiet Tour de France so far, and he's still well up in the overall classification. I don't think anybody would have expected him to be 6th after the mountains.
Well, we keep saying it, but this is his biggest test of the Tour so far. The comeback man. We think he's got good form. He hasn't attempted to attack Lance yet. He's done what Lance Armstrong has done. Let's let the others attack and stay with them as best as possible. Now, Ulrich is just over 2 minutes behind the leader, Lance Armstrong. He lies in 6th place in the race. If he can ride a time trial like he used to do, then I reckon Jan Ulrich is going to be right up there for a podium finish in Paris. He's 29 years of age now. He's 6 foot tall and weighs about 161 pounds, and he's never finished worse in a Tour de France than 2nd in the race. So I really think Jan will be proud now. He is underway as the race continues on now, with Ivan Basso also riding pretty well in that overall. In fact, Ulrich is now chasing Basso. All of the riders today departing 2 minutes apart, but already Britain's David Miller has caught his 2-minute man.
Well, Miller putting some fine performances out on the course. It's a bit tough here for Ivan Basso. In fact, there are only 3 riders left from the Fassa Bortolo squad with the abandon of Aitor Gonzalez, the man who many were expecting to be a top 10 finisher at the Tour de France, and of course Alessandro Petacchi, the man who got Italy and Fassa Bortolo 4 stage wins in the first week of this year's Tour. His position for me, Phil, is rather strange for an individual time trials. He's sitting up much too high, and the problem with that is you don't get an aerodynamic position. Wait till you see men like Armstrong come out later on and see how low Armstrong gets his body on the machine. Right now, Basso is taking a lot of wind into his chest, and basically his penetration level is not very good.
Here we are on the start house now with Tyler Hamilton. Now the press is starting to say he can't have broken his collarbone because he's riding far too well. Well, he hasn't never said he's broken it. He fractured it, and it was a hairline fracture at that, but he's still in the Tour de France, and he's now getting the count to the start. It's a big moment too for Hamilton. When he was on the team of Lance Armstrong, he was the man that used to go out ahead of Lance and check the course out, and then Lance would try and beat him, which he usually did. There's the countdown. Tyler Hamilton launches now, lying 5th overall in the Tour de France. A chance now to improve that position on the eve of the entry into the Pyrenees. Don't go far away here on OLN. And welcome back. We're looking at Tyler Hamilton. I'm quickly switching here to David Miller, who's caught one of Hamilton's teammates out on the open highway. Peter Luttenberger has been caught for 2 minutes by Miller, still setting the best time out on the course. Well, it looks as though Luttenberger has tried to keep Miller in his sights. Not an easy thing to do. Now, the rule's quite clear. You must ride 25 metres at least behind the rider if you're caught by that rider, and you must never ride directly in his slipstream. You've got to be 2 or 3 metres to the left or right of him, so you get no protection from the wind. But it's still a carrot. It's still somebody to look at and try and stay with him, but it's not easy. It's not easy, but don't forget Luttenberger's a great bike rider, Phil, because he was 5th in the Tour de France in his first year as a pro. Interesting to see how this man performs, though, because Iban Mayo is a man that many people think is going to rival Armstrong in the big mountain passes. He's won a time trial this year. It was a slow one, a short one, but he in fact did beat Tyler Hamilton by 11 seconds. Yeah, but I watched that race, Paul, and Hamilton, it was raining, and Hamilton really bottled out on a very tricky descent when he was actually scorching to victory, but he freaked, and this man didn't, and he won the time trial. Armstrong came up against him in the Dauphiné Libéré this year, just 1 month before the Tour de France, and in a 30-kilometre time trial, the American beat Iban Mayo by 1 minute and 33 seconds. Today, he will be hoping to beat him by a lot more than that. So Mayo is underway, riding his finest Tour de France, and a man who is tipped by many people to climb on the podium in Paris, but you've got to confirm in the time trial. He has no fears whatsoever of the Pyrenees. Everybody will be shouting his name, and he's a great mountain climber. So if he can just limit losses today to Lance Armstrong, he knows he can hit him back once we're going into the Pyrenees tomorrow. He also has a very good, strong team of climbers as well, because his teammate Jaime Zubeldia is also in the top 10 in the overall classification, as is Roberto Laiseca. Laiseca is a brilliant climber, but I think he'll lose time today. Miller now further out on the course, and he's looking to see what he can do at 33 kilometres covered. The best time at 33 kilometres is still Uwe Peschel, the German rider, who started off number 16 today. His time is 42 minutes and 27 seconds, and we get an indication as to just how well Miller is going. But look how hot it is out on the course here. You can see the centre of the road there is the tar has started to melt, and the reason Miller is actually riding down the centre there is because it's just slightly smoother than the rest of the surface, and it's a hot day. In fact, the temperature going up quite a bit to 97 degrees Fahrenheit right now. The face now of Alexander Vinokurov, the rider from Kazakhstan, who lost his best friend, who was killed in a cycling accident this year in Paris-Nice. Andrei Kivilev, himself a third-place finisher in years gone by in the Tour de France. And Vinokurov having his finest ever season, dedicated his first big win to the memory of his friend. And now he's trying to get a big finish in the Tour de France. He goes into the time trial second overall, 21 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. He says it's a big ask to beat Lance Armstrong in a time trial, but if I can just limit my losses, I will attack him again in the Pyrenees. And that's why we're having such a great Tour de France this year. Nobody seems to have any inhibitions about attacking Armstrong in the mountains, and this man, I would think, will expect just to conserve as much time as he can. This man, though, is trying to pull himself up in the overall classification. Tyler Hamilton starts the day in 5th place overall, and right now he realizes he's got a very good chance of rivaling Armstrong
in the individual time trial. He's a good height, he's 5'8", he weighs in at 148 pounds, but I think this year has to be the best season he has ever had, because he won the oldest one-day classic, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and of course he won the Tour of Romandie, and a couple of years ago finished second overall in the Giro d'Italia.
Looking at very shortly, I think we can perhaps go out on the course, and there he is, Ivan Basso, riding along. And I'll tell you what, the Basso himself is looking for a good ride today. He has yet to arrive at the check. Miller, by the way, is now about 7 minutes away from the next time check at Sals. Still Peschel is there. Since all day he's been there as the best time. Miller seems to be in the mood to be the next man to lodge through. Miller's time, and Laseca has passed through the first time check now. Not dislodged, he is still the best time, and Roberto Laseca has gone through. There are still 10 riders and the big names to reach that. Now back to the start house. Cool, calm and collected, lost only one time trial in the last few years of the Tour de France, beaten last year by Bottero. And now Lance Armstrong knows, he's told us, this has got to be the best time trial of his career.
Since 1999, when he came back from cancer, he's only once been beaten in the long time trials at the Tour de France, and that was last year by Santiago Bottero, and it was an 11-second beating. Right now, this is his rendezvous with what he himself has said is the most important time trial of his whole career.
And I reckon he got the biggest cheer of the day, because the press often say he's not popular in France, but it's not all true that, you know. He's quite a popular ride. He's only lost one of his time trials in the past 5 years. And today would not be a good day to lose the second one.
It certainly wouldn't. Further out on the course, Sylvain Chavanel. He is slowing down at the midpoint here. The second time check at 33.5 kilometers into Sal. And I tell you one thing, anybody starting too quickly today with this heat, which has come over the Tour de France since it started, is really cracking towards the end. And although Chavanel looked good in the early time checks, Phil, he's now losing himself more than 3.5 minutes on the leader there.
Well, by my reckoning then, Miller probably is 5 minutes up on him, which means that Miller isn't that far, probably 5 or 6 minutes from that actual checkpoint as well, because Miller's already passed Peter Luttenberger. His next man in his sights will be David Plaza. Ivan Basso, though, riding on. Nobody's caught him. He's looking very cool at the moment. Menchov is the last man through the first check, and he's 45 seconds slower than David Miller, so he's off the leaderboard there. Zubeldia will be the next man through there. That, I think, will be a much more interesting first time check. And at the moment here, we are looking at the man from Euskaltel, Euskadi Mayo. Iban Mayo then, what will he do at the first check? They're all questions which are now going to be answered over the next half hour or so of cycling. Stay with us here on OLN. The time trial really is underway now. The big hitters are on the highway. We'll be back soon. And welcome back. This is the finish now of Massimiliano Lelli in the time trial, a teammate of David Miller for Cofidis. You don't see many Italians who ride on a French team. A good ride for him, 1:4:31 and 5th place. And also arriving now, this is Grisha Nierman here, a Rabobank rider. He's going to do a nice ride too. He's given his best shot. Good place for Grisha at the moment, 10th. And as we look now at Grisha Nierman there, go down the Allée Laurent Jalabert, we swing back out onto the road and get our first good glimpse now of this huge man here, Jan Ulrich. King of the time trial in the years gone by. He began life as a 1993 World Amateur Champion. We don't have an amateur championship as such anymore. And he's developed, we all talked about him as being a winner of the Tour de France. He's done that now. He's also finished second, but he's on his way back, and he wants to prove to himself just how good he really is.
Well, we're looking here at Jan Ulrich. His time trial performances in the past have been phenomenal, but he's always been beaten by Lance Armstrong since Armstrong came back. And in fact, in the year 2000, Armstrong beat him into second place by 25 seconds in a 59-kilometer time trial. And in 2001, the last time Jan Ulrich came to the Tour de France, he was beaten by Armstrong on both occasions, once by a minute and once by a minute and 39 seconds.
Yes, well, he'd like to get close to good times again now. Iban Mayo out on course here as we now swing to David Miller. Now this is going to be the interesting check at 33.5 kilometers. The best time here is 42:27. We're waiting to see some. Oh, he's going to be up on that. He hasn't made huge gains, but he's continued the right way around. Miller racing up now with the best time at the second check, but it just shows you the quality of the ride by Uwe Peschel this morning. Miller was going through 7 seconds quicker than Peschel at the first check, and it's going to be desperately close. Is he going to hold it? Because the line, he's gone to second place. Now it's on tenths of a second, Paul, but he's lost 7 seconds over that sector to Peschel.
Half a second is the time difference between David Miller and Uwe Peschel at the second time check out on the course. We get our first chance here to see the flying lone star, Lance Armstrong. He will know now the times being set out on the course. He's the last man to start. He leads the bike race after 12 days on the open road and one opening day's prologue time trial, but he reckons today this is an important rendezvous for him. I'd like to get in a bit closer and just see what that skin suit looks like, because it's apparently been specially made for today's occasion. It's based on the same kind of skin suit used in the track and field and also in speed skating and downhill skiing.
There's a little view there of the quick release wheels. Should they have the misfortune to puncture, they'll be on the bike within about 5 or 6 seconds if all goes well. This is Iban Mayo, not a specialist of the time trial. He was beaten into third place in the recent Dauphiné Libéré, which Lance Armstrong went on to win in the time trial by Lance Armstrong. But Mayo will just try to hold on. But at the moment, we're seeing now at 13 kilometres, Jan Ulrich is proving the man is on the return, because he's produced a great ride, 16:26.
Don't ever forget this man beat Lance Armstrong in the Olympic Games time trial. As we look now here at Jose Acevedo coming to the line. This is a great ride here by the Portuguese rider on the Spanish Once squad. The time to beat still Peschel, Phil. It's holding out very long. This man started number 16, and Jose Acevedo has come up with the 5th fastest time, but the time gaps are phenomenal. 2 minutes he's lost to Uwe Peschel. Uwe Peschel, by the way, is probably an hour and a half behind in the overall classification.
Yes, well, we're looking at Iban Mayo now, and the big news is that Ulrich, now the best time, with Armstrong still to arrive at the first check. This time trial is going to be some finish. We'll take a very short break on OLN. Welcome back to the route of the Tour de France, and sensation already as we look at Iban Mayo here out on course. He's heading for the check at 13 kilometres, but at that point Jan Ulrich has just passed through with the best time ahead of David Miller, Zubeldia. Tyler Hamilton has arrived as well since, but he slots in 4th place, and there is Jan Ulrich now, beginning to look like the old Jan, who has won 4 time trials in the past in the Tour de France. Well, if he can keep this tempo up, it's going to throw a big spanner in the works, I think. We're waiting for the arrival of Mayo, Vinokurov and Lance Armstrong at that first 13-kilometre check, and then we'll get some idea as to which way this stage might go. Those blue skies and hot weather don't seem to be having any effect here on this steamroller of a man, Jan Ulrich. I think everybody who knows this man wants him and wills him to come back into the big time. He's been into the blackness of being a young man growing up, I think, and he's done all the bad things like drink driving, crashing his car and taking social drugs. But he's now come back, and just before this race his new wife has given the family their first child, and he says his morale is great, and all he's got to do is prove it to us now, and this might be the day. Switching back here to Christophe Moreau, because he's a good time trial rider. He won the prologue in Dunkirk a couple of years ago, and he held the yellow jersey of the race for a couple of days as well, but he didn't finish the race. Now he's got a chance of moving up the classification with a good time trial today.
Good chance to see the difference in the road surfaces. Now look at this. Ulrich is about to catch the man who started in front of him, and the man who started in front of him was no other than Ivan Basso. Now watch the difference in the speed. I was a bit worried there. I thought he was going to try and go up the inside as he catches Basso. Basso was 11th overall in the Tour de France last year, and Jan Ulrich has caught him after 20 kilometres of racing. He's taken back 1 minute for every 10 kilometres. That's quite remarkable.
That's absolutely remarkable, but it's an indicator, Paul. We know the speed of this man if he can find his old form, and that's been his biggest problem. He used to be famous for eating. Lance Armstrong has always said if this man refines himself, he is the classiest bike rider in the business.
Well, Iban Mayo has just gone through that first time check, and he's already lost 1 minute and 2 seconds on Jan Ulrich. So Jan Ulrich putting some huge time gaps between himself and everybody else in this bike race. Let's not forget, Ulrich was the Olympic gold medalist in Sydney in 2000, and he was also second in the team time trial on that occasion. And the man who beat him there was Lance Armstrong's own teammate, Yaroslav Ekimov. Armstrong himself finishing in third and bronze medal position.
Chance to have a little look in on Richard Virenque. He won't be setting any roads on fire today. He's got one ambition left now. He had two. One was to win a stage. He did that in the Alps in Morzine. The other one is to win that polka dot mountains jersey for a record equaling 6th time and join Lucien Van Impe of Belgium and Federico Baramontes of Spain. So he'll just ride this time trial out as best he can. He's not a great time trial rider, and then tomorrow I think we might see some more of Richard.
Well, Richard said he's dreaming about getting to the foot of the mountains again, and he needs to put in one major exploit, I think, over a long mountain stage. Possibly the stage that would suit him the best would be the stage going down into Loudonvielle, because he's got a great chance there of doing a fine performance. At 13 kilometers, now here, to me, is somewhat of a surprise. Alexander Vinokourov has gone through there in third fastest time, only 19 seconds slower than Jan Ulrich.
You know, I had a feeling, because people said, are you going to rival Lance Armstrong tomorrow? He said, that is a tough call, but I'm not going to lose a lot of time. Well, that's an extremely good ride by Alexander Vinokourov to lose just a few seconds at the first check to Jan Ulrich, who is looking so good right now as he goes right down the center of the road. And the situation at that 13 kilometers is Miller is equal time now with Vinokourov.
Well, that is an unbelievable reference. The two riders locked together. If this man is only losing 19 seconds to Ulrich but putting in the same performance as David Miller, it just goes to show that he's got great form. And it looked to me there, just a quick glimpse we got of him, as if he was having a bit of difficulty on the false flat.
Well, we're waiting to see the big man arrive at that first check at the moment. This is Ivan Parra here and Laurent Dufaux. These two riders heading up towards the, I'm not sure where they are. They're coming to the finish here now as Parra races up the line here. So this has been a very good ride. As Parra comes in now, confirming his 6th place. He's caught Laurent Dufaux for 2 minutes, and so that's an extremely good ride by Parra. He says he's got the best form ever, and he tried to win the stage into Gap, and it didn't quite work out for him. But he's showing that he really has got good condition. 10th for Parra on the line. 2 minutes slower will be the time for Dufaux.
Very good ride by the other Colombian in the bike race here. Let's not forget the opening week we had a Colombian in the yellow jersey, Victor Hugo Peña, the world time trial champion, Santiago Botero. And right now here is a confirmation as we look at Lance Armstrong. He really does look superb. He doesn't give anything away. His cadence is magnificent. The time that he's looking for, Phil, at the first time check at 13 kilometers is that of Jan Ulrich, 16 minutes and 25 seconds. He will probably be a bit rattled by the performance of Vinokourov there, 16:45, and I think he would expect it to put a big slice of time between himself and the Kazakh rider today.
It's a lonely life out there now. The time trial, when you're the race leader of the Tour de France, you're on your own, you're the last man, you're the sweeper. The crowd has stood here all day since 10 o'clock this morning watching for the riders. It is now 4:30 in the afternoon here. They've had a full day of it, all to see this man. And he keeps on getting out of the saddle, and he's gone through the check, but he's on the same time. Tenths of a second only. They put Armstrong in 2nd place by a fraction of a second.
Absolutely remarkable. Armstrong is on form here, looking to rival Jan Ulrich in the individual time trial. Georg Tocznik, the champion of Austria, coming up with a fine performance by him at 33 kilometers covered. As he comes up to the line, he will look at the 9th or 10th time here, Phil.
Well, this will be a great time from Georg Tocznik. We expected a good time from him as well, as he now continues. But what is going on? Jan Ulrich, the best time, equal with Lance Armstrong, and Vinokourov driving them both. We'll be back on OLN.
And welcome back, everybody, to France, where the individual time trials are taking place. Well, all the big guns are on the course at the moment. But right now, it is time to get another lesson from Mr. Bob Roll. We're talking about positioning on the bike.
Well, in a regular road race, obviously the position is quite a bit different than in the time trial. But even within the time trial, guys use a lot of different positions. You can see the difference between Basso's hands and his front wheel, huge. It's very tall. That allows a lot of wind to come into the upper body instead of flowing over the top of it. Here's Jan Ulrich, on the other hand. You can see right here just a tiny little bit of space between the front wheel and his hand position. Very aerodynamic, and the wind just flows right over in a nice gentle arc there. And he's absolutely flying down the road. So Jan Ulrich went blowing past Ivan Basso just a few minutes ago, and you can tell he's been working on his time trial position. One of the best in the world, world champion and Olympic medalist, also great in the tour time trials. There's no comparison between the two styles. I think that Ivan Basso, it's a good indication he needs to go back in the wind tunnel, do a little bit more testing on that. But Armstrong and Ulrich really hauling down the road.
Yes, they are. Let's get back to the action right now in stage 12, the individual time trial. Phil, Paul.
Thanks, Kirsten. Indeed, they are. I think we have all of the world's best time trialists in the Tour de France this year, and it's become a battle of honour amongst them all. As we watch the riders continue to finish just off the leaderboard here for Didier Rousse. Not a bad ride from the champion of France, who has had this title twice now, but it's the road race title, not the time trial. Didier Rousse coming in 14th place, having picked up Michael Boget out on course. This is David Plaza, same team as Jan Ulrich, and a very good finish for him, right up behind him in 3rd place at the moment for Plaza.
I think he was sent out very fast in the early part of the afternoon, Phil, just to give some time checks, to give some indications back to Jan Ulrich. It's an advantage and a help to know just what direction the wind is coming from. Here you can see the ventilation down the side of the yellow jersey there. That's been brought in this year specifically by Lance Armstrong and his work with the clothing sponsor for his company to try and keep the temperature down in this individual time test, because today temperatures are soaring to almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius. It is very warm out there, and any advantage you can get will tell in the latter part of the race. We've got a situation right now where Armstrong and Ulrich have gone through the first time check of the day in exactly the same time. But I think the surprising thing is the climbers, Vinokurov and Zubeldia, are pretty close to the man Lance Armstrong and Ulrich at the top of the leaderboard.
Well, if anybody is going to deliver a surprise today, it will be Alexander Vinokurov, because that rider is on form and is a tough boy. This rider, though, Jan Ulrich, you know, he could be climbing up to 2nd place overall in the race today. I don't think he's going to rival Lance Armstrong, of course, but he's picking up riders and they're falling like flies ahead of him. Jan Ulrich has caught Ivan Basso, and I think Roberto Heras is probably the rider in front of him at the moment. Alexander Vinokurov here is riding 2nd out of the blocks, as we know that Vinokurov has never been a regular competitor against the likes of Lance Armstrong. He's always lost pretty much big time. The best time he's ever finished close to Lance, he was 9th back in 2001 over 61 kilometres. Other than that, but then again, you have to remember he wasn't racing in 2nd place in the Tour de France then, when you ride a totally different time trial.
Completely different when you're riding to finish high in the overall classification. And Mr. Jan Ulrich right now has just blown by Roberto Heras. Roberto Heras, wearing number 2 there, started 4 minutes ahead of the German. Jan Ulrich is definitely back. He's had a hard time trying to get psychologically prepared for the Tour de France, Phil, because the team that he joined at the start of the season, Team Coast, were on and off the UCI, the International Governing Body's roster, several times because they couldn't prove the financial viability of the team. This team that he's riding for right now, Team Bianchi, was only put together 1 month before the Tour.
Yes, and he's never seemed to lose his confidence in his preparation, despite he knew that behind everybody was changing their attitudes to whether the team was in or the team without. Here's David Miller now. Now this could be a good result as we watch David Miller now. He's looking very good. He's looking around though a little bit too much for my money. He's not concentrating quite as hard, and I think there's the answer, because David is slipping away from 1st place here. Peschel survives a real good time trial performance normally for Miller, and Peschel was the 16th rider to go today, and still he remains number 1 as David Miller comes up to the line. He might hold on to 2nd place here, but this will be a 2nd place finish for David Miller at the moment as he comes into end the 47 kilometres. Long way home as always. Our camera brings him home, and he's lost a lot of time in the hills towards the end. 1:2:27 for David Miller. This is further back down the road here. Zubeldia And I don't think Ulrich will catch this man who started, who is still 4 minutes ahead of him on the road. But Ulrich riding superbly as we continue the time trial here on OLN. Welcome back to the time trial. This is the last man on the road of the 167 riders. It is, of course, Lance Armstrong, and he is equal on time at the first check at 13 kilometers with Jan Ulrich. Well, the battle is still between the men at the end of the start house today. Alexander Vinokurov was second overall, still is second overall, but he could concede that to Jan Ulrich. We're waiting now for the arrival at Ulrich at 33.5 kilometers. And Alexander Vinokurov is holding off, remember, fancy starting and having a rider like Lance Armstrong chasing you just 2 minutes back. It's a sobering thought. Here is Ulrich now heading up to the check at 33.5 kilometers. Zubeldia has set the best time here at the moment of 42 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah, but Jan Ulrich was 26 seconds faster at the first time check, just 13 kilometers into the race. Ulrich started a minute 59 seconds behind Vinokurov in second place and 2 minutes 10 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. And look at this as he comes up there. The time to beat is 42.20. Well, he's a long way inside that.
Ouch. This is going to be very difficult. Zubeldia is done 42.20. Armstrong has eaten him on the road here. Unbelievable. This is an incredible performance by, I beg your pardon, Jan Ulrich has eaten him, and he goes through with a new standard set there, Paul. 40.28. Unbelievable ride there for Jan Ulrich. Now, has Lance Armstrong kept up a similar tempo? Look at his face there. Back to the finishing house. Jan Jatska coming in. 15th place at the moment for Jörg Jatska, I beg your pardon. And another good ride by this man, is having a solid tour, but he conceded more than 4 minutes when he stopped on the highway for his fallen team leader on the road to Gap. And so Jats coming in with a solid top 20 finish for the moment.
If it hadn't been for that incident, this man would still be high up in the overall classification, but the Tour de France is not over for him yet, and he still has the ability to climb a little higher in the classification. 3 minutes 12 seconds his loss to the man who is still number one at the top end of the leaderboard at the finish line. Uwe Peschel, starting off number 16 this morning, has had to wait an awful long time here at the finish line to know whether or not he was going to run out the overall winner. But this is Zubeldia in the front in the orange jersey, has caught and passed Denny Menchov of iBernesto.com, the rider leading the best young rider competition, and it just goes to show how well he is going. By the way, for the record, at the 33 kilometer point, Roberto Heras has lost 4.5 minutes on Jan Ulrich.
Doesn't bear thinking about. And in fact, Dennis Menchov better watch out, because he's the next man in front of Jan Ulrich now, because Zubeldia has gone through. At 33 kilometers, best times at the moment is Ulrich there in 40.28 or 40.27. They round them down and up. Zubeldia is second. Peschel is lying in third place. David Miller in only fourth place there. And so not a good result for David today, because he's finished now with 62 minutes performance. Jan Ulrich here looking, Lance Armstrong here looking extremely good. He's into his rhythm, and I think he's going to run Ulrich's time very close.
Just having a look at his shorts there. The camera zoomed in quite close on his shorts on the left-hand side. I don't think he'd been involved in an accident. I think maybe they just split. And this is remarkable, because Zubeldia, I think, is about to catch his teammate Roberto Laiseca just up the road there in the orange jersey. He, of course, started 4 minutes ahead of him on this stage this afternoon, but this is a great ride by Zubeldia. He's going to be a serious challenger when we go into the Alps.
Well, he climbs well, and they've got three riders capable of attacking Lance Armstrong, and we better say Jan Ulrich now, because Mayo and Laiseca climb alongside Zubeldia in the mountains. These are the Spanish boys going home virtually in the Pyrenees, and they know they'll have all the support they require to find the firepower. Not even looking at each other, the two teammates. Laiseca, I don't think, will be overly surprised at Zubeldia. He'll just be delighted he's riding so well.
Well, they will know who the hierarchy is in the team, and everybody will have been expecting Zubeldia and, of course, Iban Mayo to do the ride in the individual time trial. The man sweeping everybody up at the moment. Last man to start this afternoon, wearing number 1 as the winner of the Tour de France last year, Lance Armstrong. He's really ticking that gear over very rapidly. He's coming under 20 kilometers to go, and this is a 47-kilometer time trial this afternoon. And we're waiting for Armstrong to get to the second time check. He won't get there for about 8 or 9 minutes, but the fastest man at kilometre 33, remarkably with a time of 40:28, is Jan Ulrich. Now Hamilton's coming up to that time check right now. He slipped away from the time of Jan Ulrich, and he's still, however, in second position.
No, Tyler Hamilton, always been a great time trial rider. Remember, we're looking to possibly see this man on the podium in Paris this year. And despite the fact that he fell so early on that first stage and fractured his collarbone, he's limped on. But I don't think limped on is the word. He's ridden so well to still remain a challenger in this race. So Hamilton continues on as a real threat in this time trial. There's the face of Tyler Hamilton. Here is the body of the man who is leading at the checkpoints. Armstrong still to arrive at the second check. He's got to keep the pressure on. We'll take a break again on OLN. And welcome back to the route of the time trial stage of the Tour de France. It's only 47 kilometres, but the gaps already opening are large. We are looking at Lance Armstrong now. We're still waiting for Lance to arrive at the second check. And this is Georg Tocznik now, the champion of Austria, coming up towards the finish. Peschel is still the leader, despite all we are seeing at the finish. This man who was 16th man out today. And this is Tocznik coming in now with a great ride for Georg. He's promised to be a real threat in the Pyrenees, and this ride might keep him in touch with the leaderboard. It's a long ride up to the line, though, for Georg Tocznik. He's had a great career. He's a good climber, we know that. And if he does a good time trial, he'll still stay a threat. 6th place at the moment.
Had a very good Giro d'Italia earlier this season, and a good ride in the time trial will keep him at the top end of the leaderboard, because it will be difficult to get rid of this man in the mountain passes. Well, he's not ridden very hard out on the course, our Richard, but for him, listen to the crowd, they don't care what his time is.
He's just cruised in here, and despite that, he's cruised in with the 33rd best time, and that puts him ahead of an awful lot of riders of the 167 still in the Tour de France. Back out on course now. We're looking to, looks to me as though Vinokurov is catching Iban Mayo here, and that's Mayo just ahead of him. That's going to give him an incentive.
There's a great incentive. That's the important thing about an individual time trial. If you can bridge the gap to your minute man, or in the Tour de France it's your 2-minute man, it's almost like having a carrot in front of a donkey. You can just dig that little bit deeper into your reserves, and he will be very pleased with his performance here, to have come across to this man who many see as a great rival for a top 3 position. But today he is losing 2 minutes already before we get to the finishing line to Alexander Vinokurov.
So they are coming here into the second check at South, and virtually together, but he's cruised right by Iban Mayo. Now Mayo knows he can climb, but he doesn't want to lose much more time here in the time trial. Massive crowd, but it's Vinokurov who is going to get the first time check ahead of Mayo, which will leave only Armstrong to come through. The best time here is Jan Ulrich's 40:28. And Sabo, just ahead of the wall at the moment, he's gone through and lost 3 minutes to this point to Jan Ulrich. Here comes Vinokurov. It is still a very, very good performance here. 40:28, he's holding second best time. The only man that will rival him will be Armstrong. This has been a superb fight by this man from Kazakhstan. He's going to go through with the second best time, with only Lance Armstrong to rival it, Paul. 41:30, just over a minute. That's brilliant.
That is a brilliant ride by this man, who is not reputedly a great time trialist. Over the years, he's lost big time in the time trials, up to 2.5 minutes over 50 kilometers. But right now, he is holding Jan Ulrich to 1 minute. Let's not forget, though, Jan Ulrich is only 1:59 behind Vinokurov for the second place finish at the end of the day. Ulrich now has got his mouth wide open, trying to get as much oxygen into those huge lungs of his as possible. But this man is like a machine. He's a strong bike rider. He's not really had a great deal of success this season, Phil. Yes, he did win a small race in Cologne in April. He's been a long way down in a lot of the other races, like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, where he was 29th. He was 5th in the Tour of Germany, 7th in the Tour of Switzerland. But I've always felt he's been hiding his game, trying to make it just right for the Tour de France.
I couldn't agree more, and this man, I think, would agree with us too. He has always said Ulrich is the man I have to worry about, and that's why when he saw him weaken slightly on the climb of Alpe d'Huez, he attacked and attacked and attacked, and then had to go on the defensive because he knew he had Jan Ulrich in trouble. Lance Armstrong is losing to Jan Ulrich as he comes through the checkpoint here at 33.5 kilometers. Armstrong is going to go through in second best time for sure. Now, how wise was he, Paul, to get rid of Ulrich on Alpe d'Huez? Because it could mean the difference today between seeing his yellow jersey go to the German and not. Armstrong coming up to the line. The time of Vinokurov is 41.30. Lance is going to beat that. 41.08.
48.8 kilometers an hour. He's lost 39 seconds over Jan Ulrich at the moment. And we discussed the tactics on the day to the Alpe d'Huez when Armstrong used his team to take up the pace on the slopes of the Col du Galibier and then accelerated rapidly at the start of the Alpe d'Huez. The reason was one, to get rid of this man. This was the man he's feared more than anybody else in the Tour de France. Jan Ulrich is an unbelievable individual time trialist. He might be a bit limited in the mountains, but he'll gain confidence with this ride.
Christophe Moreau coming home then, and he is riding home at the moment to about the 7th or 8th position, but he'll drop out the top 10 when the riders behind him start to arrive. That is for sure. Christophe Moreau, though, will maintain his challenge from the seat of being the best Frenchman, 8th at the minute.
Well, that's a pretty good ride for Christophe Moreau. That'll keep him well up in the overall classification and certainly keep him as the best French rider in the overall standings right now. But the big battle is going on further down the road, because at 33 kilometers into the race, Ulrich has beaten Armstrong by 40 seconds when they've rounded it up. Vinokurov by 1:02, Hamilton by 1:48.
Well, Jan Ulrich at the 33.5 kilometer point. They're all through now. Leads Lance Armstrong by 40 seconds and Vinokurov by just over a minute. There'll be no change in the overall classification yet, but it won't be much longer before there is. Well, as we look at Jan Ulrich now, the man who has refound himself, and he's socking it to Lance Armstrong at the moment. What a grandstand finale this will be. Don't go too far away, a short break on OLN. And welcome back, just in time to see the arrival of Heimar Zubeldia here, certain to take the best time. And it's been a long, long wait to see the best time because Peschel has led since this morning. But now Zubeldia comes in. But I can also tell you, as he does at 1:1:12, that Ulrich is catching him all of the time. So as Zubeldia here puts in a great finish, there's no doubt though, if we go back what is some 5.5 kilometers down the road, Jan Ulrich has gone through the check there 2 minutes 19 seconds ahead of Zubeldia, as now Jan sets course for the finish. This is the arrival of Denis Menchov, who will retain his challenge for the white jersey as champion of the Tour de France. Not an inconsiderable prize. Many guys who've won the white jersey have gone on to win the Tour de France. 1:3:47 for him and a great 8th place.
And just behind him there, crossing the line, Roberto Laiseca. His time will be a 1:10. This is Lance Armstrong right now. At the second time check, he was 40 seconds down on Jan Ulrich, and he seems to be riding a steady tempo. In fact, let's not forget his tempo here, Phil, is around about 50.5 kilometers an hour. So he's not weakening at all. He's riding a steady time trial. He won't panic, I don't think, because he knows he's got a 2 minute and 10-second buffer over Jan Ulrich at the start of the day. But with a ride like this, if Ulrich doesn't crack towards the end, he will have halved that deficit by the finish line.
Well, it is amazing. At the start this morning, remember, Vinokurov was just 21 seconds behind Lance Armstrong, and Iban Mayo 1 minute and 2 seconds. That's all changed now. Jan Ulrich beginning the day 2 minutes 10 seconds off Armstrong. He is now closing the gap. If it all goes well, he could be up to second. He'll certainly be up to third overall right now. Ulrich has found his old legs here in the time trial. Well, he's kept it a good secret from everybody, but he's unleashed his anger today because he is leading at all of the checks. Fastest time at the 42 kilometer check now, Ulrich. Armstrong still to arrive at 51:55. Zubeldia went through over 2 minutes down, but Zubeldia, don't forget, has finished with the best time thus far.
Tyler Hamilton, by the way, has gone through the 41.5 kilometer time check with the third fastest time, 2 minutes 21 seconds in arrears of Jan Ulrich. Ulrich is digging so deep right now. This is a very vicious position he has as well. He's got his hands right down in the front of his machine. They're getting as low as possible. This man came up through the East German cycling school in Eastern Berlin, and then once the walls came down, he has turned out to be one of the best cyclists Germany has ever had to offer. And we must never forget that this man has never finished lower than second overall in the Tour de France, and of course one of those occasions was a team victory as well.
Hamilton losing a bit of ground there, by the way, to Zubeldia. Was ahead of him, has now slipped 2 seconds behind him, but this is the big finish now of Jan Ulrich. And now have we got a man who can take on Lance Armstrong in the Pyrenees? He's certainly done it in the time trial. This is an absolutely incredible ride. We have ridden at 47 kilometers, almost 30 miles, and over terrain that you really wouldn't ride without getting out of the saddle, and this man is going to break the hour. Jan Ulrich comes to the line inside 1 hour for 47 kilometers. Look at his face. This has been a special day out for Jan Ulrich. He's won 4 time trial stages of the Tour de France in his career. This could be his 5th. Ulrich drives up the straight here now. He's going to beat the hour. 58:32.92. Now, Lance, it's all up to you.
48.18 kilometers now. He didn't finish inside the hour. He smashed it inside the hour. 1.5 minutes inside the 1 hour, and a huge beating of Heimar Zubeldia. 2 minutes 39 seconds into the second place rider, and the man who led from the start, Uwe Peschel, was looking like a man likely to win, is 3 minutes 25 seconds down at 47 kilometers covered. There are not many riders out on the course right now. Tyler Hamilton is looking pretty good out at the third and final check on the road. He had the third best time, but the crowd here, Phil, are getting behind Lance Armstrong in this year's Tour de France, because he is now no longer the superhuman Lance Armstrong. He is showing that he's fallible, and I think they actually want him to win the Tour de France for the 5th time.
Well, now Ulrich is in. Lance has got to arrive better than 10 minutes to beat Jan Ulrich, because that's how far it was out of the start house behind Jan Ulrich. Look at this massive crowd, this rather horrible little climb that comes just before the finish as Armstrong dances up here. The next man to finish will be Tyler Hamilton, and he's going to really have to turn on the style now, because he is having a great battle with Heimar Zubeldia. They were 2 seconds apart at the check with just 3 miles or just over 5 kilometers to go. We're out on the course now. This man must have been so frightened here. They're on the same climb, I think. Alexander Vinokourov has been chased all of the way by Lance Armstrong, who started 2 minutes behind him. This is a long climb, but they are both on the same climb.
Well, this is the difficult climb that comes in with about 8 kilometers to go, and I wonder whether or not Vinokourov started just a little bit too quickly. He went through the first time check in 4th position. He moved up to 3rd place at the second time check, but we're now waiting to see what he will approach the final time check of the day at, because Armstrong is just riding along here. He knows the times of the men who finished in front of him. He will have already calculated he has to finish inside of 1 hour and 42 seconds to keep the yellow jersey on his shoulders. He started the day 2 minutes and 10 seconds ahead of Jan Ulrich in the overall classification, but he now knows the man he feared to be his greatest challenger is back at the top.
And Armstrong loves a scrap. He's up for a fight here. He's a brilliant competitor. And Lance has always said if he wins his Tours de France, he wants to look back and say he's beaten the best riders. So he'll relish the fight. And it looks as though Alexander Vinokourov here is finding this last climb a bit of a struggle now. He has given his best all day in this time trial, and because of it, he may be paying the price on this rather cruel last climb. When the organisers looked at the route here with Laurent Jalabert, they decided to leave it at the rather short 47 kilometres because they said it was technically a tough course and they see no reason to make it any longer.
Well, they normally have the first time trial in excess of 50 kilometres, and over the years since 1999, when Armstrong has won the Tour de France, the first time trial has been 56, 59, 61 kilometres in length. But this one, as you say, has been kept shorter because it is a very difficult course, and the time gaps have opened dramatically in just 47 kilometres of racing. Francisco Mancebo went through the 41 kilometre time check 4 minutes and 20 seconds behind Ulrich.
Well, I was about to say no one has finished since the arrival of Jan Ulrich, but now Ivan Basso appears to be coming home. He was caught by Ulrich, of course, and now there's that time of Jan Ulrich. Ivan Basso's time looks rather sedentary, doesn't it, right now? But of course it isn't. 64 minutes for 30 miles is a heck of a good ride by this young man, a former white jersey winner of the Tour de France. Ivan Basso coming home now, one of only 3 members of Fassa Bortolo still in the race, and he still holds a reasonably good high overall position, 15th at the minute.
Well, that's a brilliant ride here by the man who was caught out on the course by Jan Ulrich. He finished 11th overall in the Tour de France this year, and he will hope this year that he can finish well inside of the top 10. Here's Tyler Hamilton right now, 4th at the final time check out on the road, but right now he's looking to keep himself well up in the top 10, and he's finished very fast as well. He's going to be outside the hour though, but still this is a great ride by the man from the United States.
It certainly is, because he was yo-yoing with Zubeldia, and he might well have taken him here with a fine effort. 2 seconds behind him at the last check. It's been a tough ride up and down with Zubeldia, but Hamilton putting in a big ride for home here. He's risen to the occasion, that's for sure. He's got 3rd place. He's just slipped behind at the last minute, 1:1.15.
These times are remarkable, but look at the speeds as well. 46 kilometers an hour for Tyler Hamilton. This man said he wanted to stay in the Tour de France to help his teammate Carlos Sastre, but right now he's #1 on the team, but he's not #1 in the overall standings, because that, at the end of the day, is almost certainly going to remain on the shoulders of Lance Armstrong. But what a great ride and what a great return to the top by Jan Ulrich. Armstrong has gone through there, Phil, and a remarkable time gap already. He's 1 minute and 9 seconds behind Jan Ulrich at 41.5 kilometers covered.
Well, we better start looking at the overall situation now, because let us not forget that Jan Ulrich was 2 minutes and 10 seconds behind, and Lance Armstrong has now lost 1 minute and 9. It's going to be very, very close, and you know, the 21-second that Vinokourov had at the start, there could be still a 21-second gap, and it could be Jan Ulrich there now.
Well, he's got about 6 kilometers to get to the finish, Armstrong. I don't see him losing a minute over that kind of distance, but Alexander Vinokourov is losing a bit of his impetus right now. The time to beat on the finishing line is 58.32 of Jan Ulrich. Vinokourov has been in the saddle for 56 minutes, 21 seconds. It's a long way to get to the finish line, but he will dig deep. We are setting ourselves up for a very dramatic last week in the Tour de France and a very dramatic race through the mountains, because I think after this time trial, people will begin to think that Armstrong can be beaten, but he has still, let's not forget, tasted defeat in the first time trial at the Tour de France before he was beaten last year by Santiago Botero.
Remember, we have judged Lance Armstrong by his own high standards, and by those high standards, this is not the same Lance Armstrong of the past 4 years. He is now being challenged, and the riders sense this from day one of the Tour de France. Lance Armstrong now is looking good to finish 2nd here, but he will still look over his shoulder and find that this time trial has far from being decisive in this year's Tour.
It certainly has, though, opened up the gap on all of the climbers, and that's certainly what Armstrong and, of course, Ulrich would have wanted to do. They would have wanted to lay domination on the roads of the Tour de France. We're looking here at Iban Mayo. He started the stage 4 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong, and I have a funny feeling in not a very short distance, Armstrong will be trailing this man before we get to the finishing line.
Well, there's only 4 riders left out on the course to finish. The next man we should see finish is Francisco Mancebo. We've never seen anything of him because he's been running away from the leaderboard. The action most certainly has been between Armstrong, Vinokourov and Jan Ulrich. Ulrich is sat down now, having a cold drink and waiting to see if he is really back in this Tour de France with a stage win. And I think the answer very much now is yes. And Alexander Vinokourov raced his heart out today. He is not out of this Tour de France either for a place on the podium in Paris. He's in the streets now of the Carmaux is where the town is. We're racing out to the mine on the outside, an open cast mine of Cap de Couvert.
Well, he's outside now the finishing time of Jan Ulrich, which is 58.32 on the line, and he's been in the saddle for 58.32, and he still hasn't come to the final kilometre banner, and his time is going to be, I would expect, around about the same sort of time as Tyler Hamilton, 1 minute and 1 second when he gets down to the line.
We have to remember that less than 40 seconds is all that Lance Armstrong has recovered from Alexander Vinokourov, and that tells us that Lance isn't riding as well as he usually does. Here is the rider of Mancebo coming in. He's still right up there in single figures for the ride for the day, and this is a good climber. Remember, as we go into the Pyrenees, these aren't the usual Pyrenees on this year's Tour de France. We are there for 4 days. These are real tough climbs ahead. For strong men, they will have a field day in the Tour de France. This has been an incredible race this year, thanks to the riding of about 6 riders.
It's been an incredible race, and it will continue to be an incredible race because we're facing up now to 4 very difficult days in the mountains. The Spanish will go ballistic when we get down to the Pyrenees because it is right on the border of their country, and this man will be fairly pleased with this ride, but look at the time that he's lost. That's almost 5 minutes on the line for Francisco Mancebo. The job of the day has been done by Jan Ulrich. A remarkable performance by the big German.
Yes, it puts Ulrich already 4 minutes in front of Mancebo now because of that one time trial ride today. Swinging in towards the finishing straight, he was closing in all the time on Mancebo, and remember that Vinokourov also caught the rider who went off ahead of him, Iban Mayo, and this is really a tight finish for Alexander Vinokourov. He has had one of the rides of his life here. He's not going to win. He probably is just going to sneak into top 3 if he can sprint. At the moment in 3rd place is Hamilton with 1:1:15, and he's going to beat that. This has been an outstanding ride here by Alexander Vinokourov. He is going to stay a challenger in the Tour de France. Hats off to him to have Armstrong behind you and the crowd looking at you in 2nd place. He has pulled off one of the greatest time trials he's ever done, and it's going to stay 2nd at the moment and will probably be good enough to take 3rd on the day. Listen to the crowd, look at his face. 1:00:38.
Quite remarkable. This man is adopted by the French crowd. He actually lives in France near Saint-Etienne. He's lost himself about 2 minutes to Jan Ulrich, but that is a serious reference to the performance that he's put in. We're now looking at Iban Mayo coming up to the line. Let's not forget Iban Mayo started ahead of Alexander Vinokourov. He is losing quite a fair amount of time on the roads of this 47-kilometer time trial today, but he will be pleased tomorrow because we're going into the big mountains, the mountains of the Pyrenees, which this team will certainly adopt as their own.
Iban Mayo comes up to the line now. He's conceding time almost, well, just on 3 minutes he's conceding to Vinokourov. Remember that Vinokourov caught him for 2, and he's now conceding almost another 1.5 here as he races up to the line. So Mayo, not noted as a time trialist, but he is great in the mountains, and he crosses the line 11th.
Good ride here. It's Armstrong right now. He was on the tailcoats of Iban Mayo. He's accelerated towards the finishing line. He's not going to beat Jan Ulrich. Look at the time, 58:32. Armstrong is well outside of that. But you know what, Phil? This is not a man who is weak. This is not a man who is giving up, but he's actually fighting to keep himself in the yellow jersey. He will do that without too much of a problem. But Jan Ulrich is going to be within 1 minute of Lance Armstrong in the overall classification tonight.
But nobody has broken the hour except Jan Ulrich for the ride today. Armstrong has made a race of this. It's been a huge struggle for him. 1 hour and 8 seconds as Lance Armstrong crosses the line. He will keep his leader's yellow jersey, but he is yet again reminded he is in the toughest scrap of any Tour de France he has ever won.
Well, I expect his advantage over Jan Ulrich is not going to exceed 34 seconds after this time trial tonight, because Ulrich has done the performance of the day. 58 minutes and 32 seconds for a 47-kilometer time trial over a course like this and in weather conditions like this are quite remarkable. Armstrong is still in yellow, but the German is now breathing down his neck, looking like a serious challenger.
21 seconds was the margin this morning between Vinokourov and Lance Armstrong. Now it is not much more than that between Lance Armstrong and Jan Ulrich. Ulrich wins the time trial stage, announces his return to the Tour de France. 58 minutes 32 seconds. Armstrong, the great Lance Armstrong in the time trial, concedes 1 minute and 36 seconds. Alexander Vinokourov does the ride of his life and loses 2 minutes and 6. Jaime Zubeldia, who can climb, is there in 4th. Tyler Hamilton, fractured collarbone and all, concedes 2:43, still remains a challenger. This is an amazing, amazing Tour de France. The face of the man setting off on a mission. It's the 5th time in his career he's won a stage of the Tour de France. And Paul, He's never finished worse than second in Paris, and that's where he is now.
That's where he's going to be right now, but I think the most important thing is this race could be decided on the final individual time trial. He will mark Lance Armstrong in the Pyrenees. He is yet to have a seriously bad day, but this man is a big engine. He's a strong bike rider. He has, as we've predicted, progressed as the Tour de France has got into the last week of racing. This is going to be a great battle on the run-up to Paris.
Well, we're looking down here on the open cast mining. It's all finished now here at Cap de Couvert. But boy, it has really uncovered a great Tour de France for us. Look at the face of Armstrong. Don't go away. We'll be back for the post-race information.